This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. It's episode 370 of the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast, and for this episode, I'm in the state of Colorado, but I'm on a different end of the state than the one that I live in. We're out here on the western slope of Colorado, Cedar Edge and Delta, Colorado. And it's an unusual episode. This is, I think, only the second or maybe the third at most podcast episode that we've ever done with a cider maker. Joining me for this episode is Kari Williams from Snow-Capped Cider. Welcome to the podcast, Kari.
Well, hi, Jamie. Nice to be here.
You've had a great couple of years, but a particularly great year this year in terms of winning at major cider competitions. And to be fair, I started talking with your PR company back 6 months, January, I think it was, right. About doing this podcast. And we're going to open a tap room. I got to come out there in the summer when it's open. You just opened it on the 4th of July. Here we are 2 or 3 weeks later. And we started out there in this beautiful old gas station turned or garage turned tap room do you call it a tap room? I guess you do have taps there.
I do. Mm-hmm. We're a tap room, a wine bar, a cider bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the things.
A little bit of all of that. And now we're over at the production facility. The Snow-Capped story is kind of an incredible one, not just for award-winning groundbreaking cider in that kind of way, but also because of the connection. The family is the fruit grower. You have hundreds and hundreds of acres of orchards. You grow estate fruit. You also bring in fruit from other friends that are growers. You have this whole process for adding value to the agriculture by adding this making side of cider making, but you've done it with so much passion and so much talent that the world of cider has absolutely noticed what you are doing here. And so we're going to try to dig into that. You also have a really fascinating, you've done a lot of testing even within your place here. And of course, we're at high altitude here, 6,000 plus feet. You're growing apples at a very, very high altitude relative to where a lot of other cider makers, especially international cider makers, make cider. And so this is a different thing. You've had to learn how to grow apples in a compelling way to make them work and make them work in the way you want them to work in cider. And you've also done a lot of work with terroir and trying to understand how terroir impacts the same apples grown in different types of places, different types of soil that you all have here on the farm. And so I can't wait to dig into your mind and try to understand more of what you have learned through this last decade plus of making cider here on the Western Slope. Before we do that, at G&D Chillers, they always strive to build great chillers. Partner with them as you build great beer. Andy Joint of Big Grove Brewery says,
"Hey, this is Andy Joint of Big Grove Brewery. We've been using G&D Chillers from the beginning, and from our original 3.5 barrel pub system up to our production brewery, we've been able to rely on G&D to provide a high-quality chiller, help us with design and layout, and provide support whenever we need it."
That's right. Choose G&D Chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring of your new G&D chiller. And ProBrew is the industry partner the brewers trust to take their operations to the next level, especially when it comes to canning their product for distribution. By partnering with ProBrew, brewers can fill and seam their canned product. It ranges from 100 to 600 cans per minute. Their unique filling process also ensures low dissolved oxygen pickup and focuses on product quality during the entire process. For more information, visit probrew.com or email them at contactus@probrew.com. ProBrew, brew your beer. Also, are you struggling to source affordable citrus ingredients due to market fluctuations? Try Old Orchard's flavored craft juice concentrate blends, which mimic straight concentrates at a better price point and with a more reliable supply. Old Orchard's citrus flavored blends include blood orange, grapefruit, lemonade, lime, and tangerine. To learn more and request your free samples, head on over to oldorchard.com/brewer. Okay, Kari, we normally start off with a little bit of history and background. This has a really interesting multi-generational, long, 100-plus year history of growing and a deep history of orchard and apple growing before the whole cider component was grafted onto it.
Right. Nice.
So why don't you tell me the story?
Well, I don't even know where it all starts. I guess my husband's a 4th generation fruit grower and our kids are 5th generation fruit growers. And of course, we have 5 grandchildren, which include 3 grandsons. So, of course, my husband has his eye on the 3 boys. It's the 6th generation. We'll see how that goes. We'll come back in a few years and I'll let you know. But
if you raise them right.
Right. Get them in there.
Fertilize properly. And
I'm definitely looking for cider makers.
Sure.
So I definitely need help. My ambition
hiring them on the open market is harder than
it's very hard.
Having some kids and having them have some kids. Sure.
Right. There's challenges in a family business as well,
Sure,
of course. Sure. But yeah, our family has, our first family member came here in 1912 and originally grew stone fruit at this elevation, and over the years switched to apples and focused more on an apple market rather than stone fruit. And throughout the years and different generations, we've flopped back and forth with a heavier yield towards stone fruit back to apples, but always been in the apple business. And a large part of our entire generational family businesses stem, and the income has always come from growing apples. So I guess we've never been without apples. I don't know what life without apples would look like, really.
You all are apple to the core.
We are apple to the core, and the apple whisperers.
Sorry, I'm just my dad puns are just flowing today. I apologize.
But I guess through the generations, the most interesting thing about what I think this family does is, I don't know if we initially chose this elevation or what. But when the family homesteaded here and started growing, it was, I think, a bit easier to grow here than it has been throughout the next generations. And maybe they just didn't know what they were in for, really, at this elevation. As the generations,
it's a beautiful place to live.
It is a great place to live. It's a great place to raise a family. It's a beautiful area of Colorado. We're very centrally located here to Aspen and to Telluride, and we're not far from Crested Butte, and lots of really awesome things. We're right at the bottom of the Grand Mesa. But I think the family, the work ethic that has been instilled generation through generation to survive for, the next generation to live off of our fruit growing legacy, I think is it carries a great deal of pride. It takes a lot of work, and it takes the next generation really truly being involved and being interested in what they're doing. And I think that has been one of the things that have really, been of interest to me and drove me as I evolved into, becoming a cider maker, which really wasn't planned. I've obviously been around the fruit and around the fruit growing techniques and the growing methods used by my family and watched them. I've watched our kids go off to receive ag degrees and be interested in things like that, come home and think, geez, that was like a waste of time. You guys could have taught me everything I needed to know. I didn't even need to go there, but everything is relative, and you do gather all kinds of information throughout your life and in all the things you do. And I find that in my cider making, it's a combination of a lot of things, of a lot of experiences in your life that makes you good at any certain one thing. And I think it takes all of those things sometimes, and your experiences and your education. I certainly didn't train to be a cider maker, and I don't have a formal education in winemaking or cider making or a fermentation science degree. My background is in marketing and business. And so I, always anticipated being more useful to the family in those areas. But my passion for the fruit and seeing the amount of work that goes into growing at this elevation and what my family has had to do since, the 1900s, freezing water from lakes and hand wrapping the apples and loading it into rail cars to get the fruit out of this valley. It's just a really intriguing thing to me. Cider making just kind of came about because...
Yeah, so how did it come about?
Yeah, we made wine. We grew grapes, and I think, and my entire family, everyone in my family works 7 days a week. So in order for the Williams family to take a vacation, that means we're going to the Ag Convention in Washington to talk about and look at more fruit and apples. Sure. That's a vacation. The whole family goes. So we grew wine grapes, and I think it was considered our hobby. That was our recreational thing to make wine, because we all love wine and loved growing it. And everything that we're about is growing. We love growing all things and trialing new things. And that's kind of something that runs throughout the whole group. And so I think, we discovered cider. We inherited sort of some cider apple trees from someone and thought, well, cider might become a thing. We'll plant some trees. We have a little extra room here or there or wherever, and didn't really pay much attention to them for quite some time. And kind of just started experimenting with cider for fun. We never really intended on selling it or being a commercial, cidery.
Sure.
And, actually at one point we were on the wine license all together as one family, and the elders kind of got together and, told my husband and I, you guys need to shut this down, or you may need to make it a real business. What are you doing? What's this bill for all these bottles and all these things? And, what are you doing? And so it really was determined that nobody really had time. Being business people, we know what it takes to make something successful and the amount of work, and everyone's lives are so involved in growing the fruit and marketing the fruit and packing the fruit and selling the fruit and growing quality fruit and getting through harvest, getting through frost protection, doing all the things that we've got to do at this elevation, that it really was obvious that there was no one that was going to do that but me. There was no one that had the time for it but me. No one asked me to do it. Matter of fact, it was
you had the 8th or 9th day, just, over the week, just sitting back there somehow.
I was like, I could fit it in. And so I just decided it myself. I said, you know what, I think I'll take it. I'll buy it. I'll do it. And, it was kind of a joke. It was like, oh yeah, sure. Whatever. And okay, cool. Whatever. And so I relicensed it, and, away I went, and using all of the excess fruit that my family doesn't sell to commercial grocery, meaning culinary varietals. We're commercial fruit growers. We grow for fresh pack grocery. And over the years that we've been in business, over 115 years, there's been many, many varietals come across our farms. So there's always old heirloom apples somewhere. There was always things transitioning. And we've grown a lot of different things. And so I had the education piece already there. I knew that I was with the finest fruit growing family in Colorado, the only large fruit growing family and the largest fruit growers. So I had the fruit. I wasn't really exactly sure what to do with it, but I became really interested in trying to figure it out, really not from a financial aspect. I knew that I had to make the cider company profitable enough to where I could do the things that I was interested in. And that was experimenting with cider apples, with fermentation. And I had a theory, I had a thought in my mind that was kind of going to drive me to do that. And so, off I went, and I pulled the company's products and skimmed them down. And, at that time, I think we had like 24 ciders in 750 bottles, and we were doing Spanish style ciders and, coffee ciders and all kinds of crazy things that no one had done. And I skimmed it down to what made sense and what I felt was the best, and put it in cans and started distributing it. And, I worked festivals and drove to Denver and, marketed the product. I was the salesman. I was the cider person. I was the everything. And, but I had a lot of fruit to work with. So, it was just a huge advantage that I had. over, I think, other cider companies, even in my own state. I didn't have the manpower, really. I did know how to market it, and I had a true passion to kind of grow it and figure it out. And, I've never once ever paid myself in the company. I mean, my husband, we're fruit growers and we own orchards, and that's where we make our home living. Everything that I've done in Snowcap Cider, I've put back into the company and pay my people and, do more projects and more things. And so it's just a really kind of blessed place to be if you are a maker. And, why wouldn't I? That's what I kept thinking as I was out doing festivals and working and trying to get new distribution and trying to grow the company just big enough to where I could buy really expensive bottles and do more fermentations and buy more jinks. And that's really what my goal was. It was as simple as that. And, bringing forward the family's legacy and all the things that I see them work for, and the fact that they have survived this long at this elevation, I wanted to do something very prideful to honor that. I was never interested in just putting some concentrates in a can or bottle and flopping it out there for profit. It really comes from a different place for me.
There's a pride in all the things that you do here, and a pride in the quality of the fruit you produce, and you had to have cider that also reflects the same kind of pride that you take there. Well, I'm really curious how, because the way that you tell this story, it sounds like you tell the marketing and the brand building story, which certainly makes sense, but you're also the creative driver behind these and driving the product side. You have folks that help with production, but you are leading up that side in the entire kind of creative direction and making side. And I want to talk about how you got to the place quickly that you needed to be in to be able to do that, and then started creating the vision for what Snow-Capped Cider will be now and what it is now. This multi-award winning, one of the winningest cider companies in North America and even the world. I want to talk to you about that. Before we do that, experience distinct transparency and juiciness with Omega Yeast's Daybreak 5, using their Lumina technology. Omega genetically eliminated haze in the popular British 5 strain, allowing you to preserve the fruit-boosting prowess while achieving crystal clarity. Perfect for modern West Coast IPAs. Learn more at info@omegayeast.com. And can seams should not just be handled by the OEM. Relying on outside help to confirm your product is shelf-ready puts your final product and your bottom line at risk. Take back control with RSS Macklin. They provide the training and resources that breweries of all sizes need to ensure the exceptional quality of your product remains the same from beginning to end. For more information, visit rssmacklin.com. That's RSSMACLIN.com, or email service@rssmacklin.com. Also, if you're a brewery or distillery and planning or interested in adding a brewery or distillery to your existing craft beverage business, visit breweryworkshop.com now. Secure your spot in our upcoming brewery and distillery workshop this September in Fort Collins, Colorado. Opening or purchasing a brewery or distillery today is rife with challenges, and the things you don't know that you don't know could be the difference between failure and success. Invest in the success of your business with this 4-day intensive filled with panel discussions, small group sessions, technical tours, and more. Learn more at breweryworkshop.com. All right, Kari. So you had to get up to speed as a cider maker pretty fast.
I did.
Talk to me about your process there. And then I also want to talk about your creative process, because as we were tasting stuff earlier, you talked about tasting fruit and envisioning what the final cider is going to be like, writing that description, talking about those tasting notes, and then working a process to achieve that final taste, which I think is a fascinating creative approach, rather than working backwards and letting the process determine the flavor and then writing from that point. And so I want to talk about that too, but first, talk to me about how you went about learning, how you went about building that kind of that knowledge that you had to have on the making side in order to be able to do this.
Well, I think most of it's
intimidating for people to get into this.
It is.
But then you are just a force of nature, and you're like, I can do this. And you're going to do it. And you did it.
Yeah. I think that when you don't know any better, you don't really have any fear. And so I just decided I was going to do it and do it. And so some of it came from the winemaking background, so I understood. Other thing that I really believe strongly in is always surrounding myself with people that know more than I do. And so by no means expecting them to do my work, but contributing and having a strong team around me. So if there was someone in my small area that knew about brewing or home brewing and whatnot, I just want to talk to them. And I may not do what they do or agree with what they are doing or even think what they do is good, but I still think there's something to learn everywhere. And I think being open to that has really helped me. So, I think most of the people that have worked for me have been, amateur fermenters. And so they've always been really willing to come along for the ride and do crazy things and try things and let me kind of lead the show. And that's helped. I think it comes from the winemaking background. This is going to sound really strange, but I attribute, so I'm a very sensory-based maker. I am not a technical maker. Of course, I care about the technicalities and we have certain things we follow and different things like that. But I don't really mind bending the rules a little bit to experiment with things. Having a lot of fruit has helped me because I've got the luxury of time. I feel as though I wasn't in any big hurry or stress to be a huge company or to do any of those things. I was more focused on quality and learning and trialing and terroir, and absolutely fascinated with what I could do with the fruit that comes from some of the highest elevation orchards in the Northern Hemisphere. And that, quality of fruit that I've seen my family bring in, even if it's a Honeycrisp or whatever it is, and then working and doing certain growing techniques. I think there's so many little tiny moving parts to it actually coming into my production facility. And like I told you earlier, and I get really excited about some apples. I do. And I've spent a lot of time finally getting them and growing them and cultivating them. And maybe they didn't do very well in one area of the orchard. So we've moved them. Having my own orchards now that I source cider fruit from, that I don't have to depend on the excess fruit from my family. I love using it.
You've carved out some acres here and there.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I have my own orchards too now. And so, I'm a grower too. So I'm involved in all aspects of it. And it all influences me in a sensory way. And, it starts with the elevation and the area and the terroir and being fascinated by it. And when I have certain varietals come in, if I'm not in the orchard when they're being picked, my favorite ones, I'm there. I can't pick the fruit myself. I can't do all the things and do the whole company and all the things we talked about and also pick fruit. I can't. But my husband manages my fruit. My husband is my fruit grower. And what's a great advantage to me is he can come in and say, this is how much water we had. This is the way the weather has affected the crop. This is what you're getting. This is the way this apple's coming into you. And I already know what it's like. And he knows too. And so if there's particularly wonderful fruit coming in for certain reasons, I know that as well, whether it be a culinary apple or an heirloom apple, a cider apple, whatever it is. So I think getting
that close connection and that, that farming control,
right.
That, the winemaker's prize, even if they're sourcing grapes from another vineyard, being able to, be there direct, making sure that the harvest is happening with the kind of, picking at the quality, that time of ripeness. It's exactly what brewers are looking for when they are working with certain hop growers, to find that perfect time of picking that fits exactly what they're looking for. Exactly. And this kind of estate connection with your fruit allows you to dial those things in precisely.
Yes, I live in the orchard. I know when our family's out for frost protection night after night. I know when the fruit's coming in. My husband, all we talk about is apples. He comes in and he says, your Blanc Malays are 2 days away or 3 days away. I need you to go look at them. I need you to tell me and help me stage. I help stage the picking for my own fruit and talk about where it's at with him. And I've learned a lot of things from that. And not just watching the family work in the orchards. I walk in the orchards. I live in the orchard. I touch the grapes. I'm with the apples, and I am very connected to the whole process. So it is a very romanticized thing for me. But when the fruit is there, I'm either on the dock waiting for it, or I'm in the orchard and I'm sucking the juice out of the apple, and I'm so excited about it. And I sit down with all of this fruit and all of this huge planner, and it takes me 3 or 4 days to figure out what I'm staging, what I'm moving forward, what are my special projects. I've already decided what I'm going to. Yeah.
It's based on what you're tasting at that harvest.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you today what my next year's competition entries are. I can tell you what I want them to be, but I will be able to tell you when I get closer to harvest what my projects are going to be. But I wait until the fruit comes in, and then I move certain things forward, and I decide right there what fermentation technique, the way it's going to be finished, what yeast is going to be used if it's going to be a pitched ferment, would it be an arrested ferment, what is going to happen to it just by tasting the fruit. And after I get done with that and the things are staged.
What are some of the aspects of that might, shift you? Like, what is it about a specific, apple's flavor or the impact of that year's growth in that specific variety that might lead you to make a specific decision in one way or another?
Well, different apples, of course, are different things. And, we live in an environment where we are so affected by the UV exposure. And so high UV exposure, a lot of people say growing in these conditions are the temperature shifts, the cold, the warm, the high temperature shifts between warm days, cool nights, harsh winter conditions, things like that. And it is that, but it is also really primarily the UV exposure. So everything about growing in an environment like this is highlighted. Every aspect of certain things in fruit that a cider maker is looking for are highlighted, and they are enhanced by growing here. But everything that is also negative about growing in this environment can be very enhanced here, meaning that we are risking, clear up till Mother's Day, harsh hailstorms and freeze outs and lots of different things happen throughout the year. Water is a huge thing, of course, and we do have good water. Our water is sourced from direct snowmelt water from the Grand Mesa, which, as you know, is the largest flat top mountain in the world. And it is directly sourced and gravity fed to our orchards and then micronized to the trees. So those little tiny aspects of things, to me, all contribute. Then you have weather conditions and how your crop has fared, and then you get down to the varietal and the varietal's characteristics and how maybe more drought or more water or harsher environment conditions or a later thaw or things like that might be affecting those flavor profiles. And there's so many. It's incredible. And honestly, I've learned to observe that from, living with fruit growers. That's, like I said, we have to agree at family meetings to not talk about apples. It's crazy. But, so there's a lot of things that affect it. And I like
this idea though, that this higher and this greater UV exposure, maybe just if I think about an audio analogy, it produces a wider dynamic range. Your peaks are higher, your valleys are lower.
Exactly.
And so
the risk here is very great. So, but the reward is very high. So we're working with that type of environment with growing our fruit every year to where we get to harvest. And so when you get the reward from high elevation fruit growing with the other aspects I'll talk to you about with the growing techniques that we use to survive here, you can come out with a very high-end product. And the UV exposure, it puts the trees into distress is what it does. So it's a lot like what you hear about foraging concepts. So in a way, except for we're nurturing the fruit. So the UV exposure is putting the trees in distress, and they pump acid throughout themselves to protect themselves. And as the acid is pumped through the tree to protect itself from the stress it's under from the UV at this elevation, it increases the bricks of sugar concentration in the fruit. even in just a culinary apple, one of the reasons I believe this family has survived and is one of the last growing families at this elevation is, growing techniques and high quality fruit and being willing to put the work in this elevation and being established. This is not a place where you would come and say, you know what, I think it's a great investment to plant a new orchard here. That would not be true. So, but having such deep roots in it already and generational, investment in it and the work that's been put in to do it, we understand the assignment and we'll come out in full force and do the work to get that high quality product. And it's a lot more labor intensive than a lot of fruit growing areas, for sure. But like I said, the reward is this very high concentration of sugar in the fruit. With that sugar, when I grow a cider specific apples or peri pears or things like that, that is also enhanced. So if the apple is a tannic apple or is known for astringency or acid or its certain characteristics, all of that is enhanced here. So I love cider and I love making cider, but I'm very humble about it because I feel as though I'm in an environment where you almost could not make bad cider. I do feel like it's obviously skill of the maker when it comes at the final part of it and all of the things.
You're not sending any of the battles back to hanging them on the trees themselves.
Okay, no. Somebody told me I needed to stop entering competitions to let other people win. And I did think about it, but I'm not going to.
Sure.
But it comes from just being exploratory and being so passionate about the things that I'm doing and trialing. But a lot of it is the quality of fruit that I'm working with and the environment and the terroir. And that is what I'm most passionate about. And that's what drives me to make cider.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about this because, now you've got the growing conditions themselves, which can either produce amazing fruit or also just the most heartbreaking failures that you could possibly imagine, and where you end up with nothing to harvest. Exactly. And so you are also making decisions about what you go and the products you make based on how these things come in every year. But then you are also making decisions as to, what might make some of these varieties grow better in other parts of the same property that you have in different kinds of terroirs, because, the farm is big enough that you have different kinds of areas to grow. And I'm curious about, what you've moved from place to place, and what you found, in terms of that impact of terroir, microclimates, et cetera, on the way that these things express, or whether that creates more consistency, or whether that actually amplifies certain characters that you like, or even drives down some of the characters you may not have liked as much, because both of those things, work in that direction, both, positive, negative, but also overall volumes. I want to ask you about this whole terroir question. Before we do that, Indie Hops breeds new hop varieties to help brewers captivate beer lovers. Brewers worldwide trust Indie's unique varieties, Strata, Lorient, Luminosa, Meridian, and Audacia, to modernize, brighten, and diversify their beer lineup. Indie also offers classics that thrive in Oregon terroir, such as Chinook, Crystal, and Sterling, thoughtfully crafted and selected hops to meet your brewing needs. Visit indiehops.com/podcast to discover what's new in hop flavors. Indie Hops, life is short, let's make it flavorful. And Berkeley Yeast, founded by bioengineers, it's yeast that's designed to improve flavor, quality, and consistency, increase efficiency, and save you money. If you've been following yeast, I'm sure you've heard about their strains. Super Bloom strains make classic hops flavors. Fresh strains keep diacetyl low, even with large hop additions. Tropics strains make a tropical bouquet reminiscent of the finest Southern Hemisphere hops. And they just dropped new strains that are even more futuristic. Nationwide free shipping. Mention this podcast for 20% off your first order. So let's talk about terroir a little bit, Kari. I mean, I've talked about this with Tom Shellhammer, the hop scientist. He's been studying hops terroir from growing regions between Washington, Oregon, Idaho, etc. Obviously winemakers love talking about terroir. We have British beer writer Matt Curtis wrote a big piece trying to debunk the idea of terroir. Like, there's lots of debate around this question of terroir. And I love you, Matt, even if I disagree with you. but terroir also figures into this pretty deeply for you. You love this terroir that you are in here, but even within this broader idea of Western Slope, Delta Cedar Edge terroir, you've got different places to grow apples that also drive different kinds of expressions of terroir. Talk to me about what you've seen around that.
It's been interesting. I've trialed different apples in different orchard locations over time. Like we have an orchard down by, it's an old homestead orchard on the North Fork of the Gunnison River. And it's a property we don't frost protect as much. We flood it and freeze it during frost protection years, and we focus on our other locations a lot. And it's an area that 5 years in, I couldn't get the Kingston Black to do anything. I couldn't get anything to do anything down there. Different temperature, a little bit lower elevation, which should be fine. Everything else grows beautifully there. But I found that cider apples were very slow growing there. And it intrigued me, and the need to plant cider apples amongst my family's commercial orchards, which really wasn't, their idea of a great thing. But, and get more volume of that fruit has, some by accident, like, can I plant a little bit here and can I have a little bit there? And pretty soon we had a block here and a couple rows there and this and that, and just tucked in all over the place. And I started noticing on different frost years, some of the same fruit would fare better in different locations. And, that really intrigued me to see if I moved things around, how it would do. And sure enough, when Colorado had its big freeze several years ago, I had orchards that were, 60 feet that were dead to the root on culinary apples. And I had Blanc Mollet French cider apples thriving. You know what I mean? It was just where the cold settled in down at that little pocket and, killed the fruit to the root, and we removed the trees. And I've learned a lot of things moving things around, and I keep my husband calls it the Harry Potter book, but I keep this big journals of things, as I'm going along, and I don't think anyone could ever read it but me, or even understand, because a lot of it is just what I'm thinking and maybe not so scientific, and just notes about things. And sometimes there'll be a note next to it, well, this is what I think I should try because this made me think of that, and, leads me to the next thing. But, I started by moving things around and noticing that because of our elevations and our different locations, things were doing better than other things. Things were more hardy. The trees had more vigor, things like that. And then I started documenting when the fruit came in from different harvest years, was that different? And it is. And I think it just has a lot to do with weather conditions and how much rain you get naturally, how much more water we use, how much frost protection we had, how cold did it get right before it stressed the tree and it still lived, things like that. And it's an ongoing kind of science experiment for me to not only move trees around, but I bring in and still do almost 200 carboy trials every fall. I've got things.
200?
Yeah, so many. I have so many, we can't manage them. A lot of them I can't finish, but a lot of things, I was just so overly ambitious about it because I was so consumed by the research that I've been doing with it. Planting apples, moving apples, trialing different things, the ways to ferment, co-fermenting, different methods of things, theories that I would just write in my book that I thought that were things that I wanted to try because I noticed a particular flavor profile in a fruit, even in a culinary fruit, or, different things like that. And so I've just kind of turned into kind of like an apple laboratory or something. And with all of that, I've learned things that you can manipulate flavors in the palate with a cider that is completely dry, that's fermented dry with the right fruit, especially in a high concentration year, maybe with an English varietal or a blend of varietals, and make the drinker think that it is sweeter than the cider really is in the palate. both
just
by
through the higher concentration of the flavor itself.
The flavor concentration, the way that you've blended it, fermented it, it can be completely unfiltered and 100% dry, and you can drink it and think that it's not dry. And I've learned how to.
You say way that you fermented it, is it because it's leaving some non-sugar characteristic of body?
Yeah, and even if I have filtered it, I've figured out how to do some things like that by big research book, going back and figuring out how to do things and manipulating things, sugars in the palate with sugars and fruit. Because I have such high sugar concentration here, I can take those things and blend them and make you feel like I've sweetened a cider that I have not sweetened. And it's just, it starts with starting to understand from the research how to stage the fruit. Some fruit I bring in and I let it sit purposely before I macerate or ferment it and juice it.
Let it sit. Were there specific varieties that benefit from sitting longer?
Yeah, some do. And if you have a certain outcome that you're looking for.
Some do. You're not going to tell me which ones.
I'm going to tell you. Some do, though. Yes. And some things do. And
are there trait staples that lend themselves to sitting longer versus, and are there some of those just general traits? Is it
there's some things like when I
pH
stage,
or is it tannic level or
all?
Okay.
It's some of all of those things, but some fruit needs to be juiced right away. Obviously, you need to juice it right away. Most of that is a lot of culinary varietals. Some varietals will keep longer. Another advantage that I have is because I moved the cidery in like a vagrant and got free rent from my husband, and I have my own long-term fruit storage cooler. So I can stage fruit to my juicing from my own cooler. So it's really awesome. I can keep it. I don't have to worry about trucking it. It trucks from the farm to the facility to the cooler. And so and
this is like a no oxygen environment cooler,
right.
so they can just hang out there.
Yeah, and they can just hang in there. And all of my ciders in there. And anyone...
Those coolers are crazy.
Isn't it cool?
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah, you can come in, at different parts of the year, and you'll see trees that I'm about to plant in there. You'll see finished cider, raw cider, cider that's fermenting, cider that's already finished that I'm just storing there because I won't finish it right away. I'll have fermented it and I think it's there, but then I'm not ready to finish it. And I leave it on purpose, and then I'll bring it forward and I'll stage other things ahead of it. At the same time, I have to keep the canned part of my business running constantly. And so, because I'm an estate cidery, I'm moving a lot of liquid around and a lot of apples all the time. So, the fruit has got to turn to juice, and the juice has got to be either stored, frozen, or fermented. After it's fermented, it's got to be stored, finished, or packaged. And so it's a constant, inventory warehousing thing, moving juice. I use fresh cherries and things, and we juice them, and peaches. I process all of our own peaches. I've got to project my entire year's distribution around my own juice to be an estate cidery, and it's really a lot. And so I've had to, in order to really focus on the things that I'm really best at in the creative area, I've had to hire extra teammates just to move things around for me and keep that moving and flowing so that I can focus on kind of messing around with the juice and working on my trials and continuing my research and all of my other things that I really love to do, and run the company. I mean, honestly, and yes, I do make all of the creative decisions, and I say what we're making. I taste every batch of cider that comes out of our facility. Even if it's just Honeycrisp that's going in the can. I've got a crew.
Chief sensory scientist also.
Yeah, I have a crew that can do it. And they, there's times if it's a certain blend, I will let it go without me being here if I have to. But generally I'm on site and I'm around here, and it's a small area. And I can do that before everything leaves for a quality control. My main office is being built above the production space, and it's all in glass, and I can see everything that's going on. It's really awesome. And they can wave me down when they need me. But yeah, I mean, I have hands on everything. I'm not afraid to turn things over to other people. But I'm very involved in pretty much everything we do. Yeah. I mean, I don't have to pump the liquid around. But in the wintertime, when I'm doing a lot of the more important work, I'm in here on the weekends. I'm feeding ferments. I'm helping. I have my guys pump it around for me and then I taste it.
Sure.
But it lessens the amount of load on me, but it allows me to kind of figure out all the other things. My crew says often, I hope that I can look at cider the way you do someday. You walk up and just approach a cider and taste it at any stage it's at, and you can say what it is and what needs to be done to make it better, or if it's not going to get better. And I want to be able to do that. And so I have them both in my two main people in the Pommelier program with the American Cider Association. They're both level 1s now, and they're studying for level 2. And it's been really helpful to lead them. I don't know that everybody has whatever it is that's leading me down the road to constantly be obsessed with apples and move them and ferment them and trial them and do all the things that I'm doing right now. I don't know where that comes from. I can tell you that the fruit is telling me what it wants to be. And so I'm just following that passion. I love the terroir aspect of it. Mm-hmm. I think I have a really unique environment to create cider and to contribute to the cider industry. With the unique environment that I'm in.
Right.
And yeah, I know a lot of people do debunk terroir. I think terroir is so many things. It's not one group of 3 or 4. To me, it's so many small things.
What do you track in terms of terroir when you are writing these things down in your notebook and trying to understand what terroir means? What does it generally mean to you? What are the key performance indicators of terroir?
I think there's particularly interesting things about this location. It's interesting. I think it's a combination of things. To me, what it is, it's a heartfelt love and care for the land that you're entrusted with. I think there is a lot of that in it. The passion that I see in this family going out and working the way they do to bring in the fruit, to do it for generations. I think that is just a really inspiring piece of it. I think that here, particularly, of course, we're at the bottom of a volcano. We have volcanic soil. It's an interesting soil composition. It makes it a very fertile place to grow things. But on the flip side, it can contribute a lot of salt to the Colorado rivers, things like that. But the elevation that we're at, the temperature shifts, the exposure to the UV, the direct snowmelt water I talked about, being micronized to the trees. It uses less water. In many of our orchards, we're high density growers where we use less of a footprint. We use less water. We can grow more fruit that way for production. I don't, my cider orchards are not all high density, but I have trialed Kingston Black on the wire. I have fruit that is, cider specific English, bitter sharps, bitter sweets, growing 2 foot thick, 12 foot high fruit walls where I can grow a lot of volume of fruit like that. I also have 75-year-old pear trees, and it's really fun to see that combination and continue work and looking at, 45-year-old galas on a super spindle that are still producing the way they do. And be able to gather all of that and gather all that information from the growing season and put it together and make it, into something just extraordinary, But to me, terroir is just all about the unique location. And this is definitely that for growing trees between 6,000 and 7,000 feet.
How, when we look at the lineup, because you have core lines in cans, you make, larger batches, larger volumes of consistent brands in cans. You also have a pretty humongous range of single varietal or otherwise highly specialized ciders that are primarily in 750 milliliter bottles and, are really there to express each one of these different apples or processes in its own very focused kind of way. It's a lot of different approaches to cider making, which I now understand why you have 200 carboys going in any one given time. But it also means that, you're not just tracking, the progress of all of this fruit, and most of that's estate fruit, and occasionally that's other fruit that other growers are growing for you, or that you're trading with them, or whatever, however else that might look.
I trial apples. I go and get apples that we don't currently have, and I seek them out from specific orchard locations, and I send my truck, I go get them, and I juice them and trial them and decide if I could make something extraordinary from, a lower elevation. I trial it in that way before I plant it here. And that's, and that's some of the highest.
Then you win some medals with it. Great. Now I gotta make that one too.
Right. And I just think I study fruit all the time, and I'm fascinated by the history of apples and the origins of apples and where they've came from, and early prohibition, pre-prohibition America, and the whole story of cider in general, going back to the Celtic days or before, and it being such an old traditional beverage. Maybe it was just because they didn't have clean water and they were drinking fruit in the beginning, and some of those things. I think the history of it is really interesting. I think the loss of the importance and the details in cider is such a tragedy. I'm very interested in, being at this elevation gives me an opportunity to really heighten those old varietals and bring them back and say, this is a foxwhelp apple grown in Colorado's highest elevation orchards and those things. And I think it's really important to also continue contributing to the industry of cider and the knowledge of cider, what it is today, because today cider is many things. It can be more like a beer, it's flavored, it's a lot of things. But what it has lost is the importance of the varietals. And that's where I feel like I really shine as a cider maker, because the fruit that I can grow here and the focus that and the time that I can put, I have the luxury of time. I'm not in a big hurry about it. And I can really focus on producing and talking about what the flavor of a foxwhelp apple should have been, or, the wine sap, how it was written, that it had wine-like esters in its day. And there was such reference given to it for different terroirs that it was grown in, and noted how differently it tasted and the results from that fruit. Is the fruit the same today? Most likely not. But I love...
Our UV levels are not the same
right?
that they
That's
once
true.
were either. So,
that's true.
Sure. That's 200 years ago.
But it's a fascinating thing for me to represent that and to present that.
And you're also taking this raw material of an apple and understanding, it's not just what that is going to create. It's also thinking about where modern palates are, what a modern person tasting this is also going to enjoy out of all of the possibility that flavor apple's juice could actually produce, and then using those tools to kind of move it in that direction, rather than just, oh, well, this one tastes kind of earthy and rustic, and this is what it is, but who wants to drink this? Because that doesn't change things. That doesn't it doesn't encourage people to want to keep drinking these things.
Right.
You don't just need to make something that was really interesting for the cider nerds to try once and never drink again, because there's not a lot of longevity in that as a business.
Right. That's exactly right.
So you have to figure out how to then take these heirloom apples, these apples that you love and these varieties, but also make them expressive, pull the best characters out of them, but find a way to connect those to modern palates.
Exactly. And, that's the wine-like tendency in cider. I find wine fascinating and love it. Wine in Colorado, maybe not so much, even though we do have wine grapes and grow wine. I find cider much harder than wine. It was just, most sommeliers will be like, what is she talking about? She has no idea. But honestly, I think it's much harder to understand apple flavors, apple varietals, and understand how to blend them into something that is highly layered and complex in the palate. And lasting in the palate, that gives you an impression that, wow, my goal is to give you something and for you to say, wow, I never knew cider could even be like that.
What are one or two of your blending tricks to do that? And again, you don't have to give me all of your deepest secrets, but I'm just, what are some of the tools and levers that you pull to kind of heighten or really make more interesting or palatable or expressive some of these characters?
I think it comes from just, all that research and reading and I study apples. So I'm not a TV watcher.
I know, but what do you do?
I'm not you know what I mean? I study them and I know what they used to be like. I know what they're supposed to be. And then, I know that I'm enhancing them by growing here. And knowing and understanding the flavor profile in an acidic piece of fruit opposed to an astringent piece of fruit, and knowing how many bricks of sugar it normally has, and understanding that is where it's really at. It really is. And then it just comes down to, I think, the palate, the sensory-based part of blending. I think, a lot of people will be like, I'm going to put this and this and this together. And I'm thinking, why? Those two things don't go together. And I attribute a lot of my palate to cooking. I mean, it's simple as that. I love to cook and I understand flavors and sauces and things like that. And it's a very helpful piece of what I do. Understanding flavors and how to mix them and how to blend them in cooking has really helped me. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. It's all part of the making process. And so some of the things that I do, you need to understand, I think, sweetness, tartness, and bitterness, and how to blend that together. And some is just trialing. I mean, there's some failures. I mean, I'm not going to say that I haven't thrown away at least 100 of those carboys. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things happening all the time.
50% R&D success rate is still not too bad.
But yeah, I mean, we did 14 new products last year. I have products that are new products that are getting distributed into our can line. And, all of that was intentional. None of it was a thing. But, you also need to be not afraid. There were 2 cans that we brought forward we thought were great marketing. I thought it was absolute great thing. Wonderful apple blend, super great for the consumer, very relevant in the market right now, that I held back and didn't do them. I just felt like that wasn't the right timing.
Yeah.
Maybe they weren't just the right thing, and we didn't do it. And there's no reason with that high of quality of fruit and juice not to blend it into something else.
Sure.
So, a lot of cider fruit and a bulk cider fruit that I have that, I'm not a big enough cidery to use as much juice as actually I produce.
Yeah.
I have a lot, but, it's really easy for me to blend that back into, a lot of my ciders that are culinary blends during the year. Dry blends and whatnot, they end up having a lot of cider fruit in them. They started out as more culinary dry blends, and they have a lot of cider apples in them too. And that's a huge benefit to the product line. So,
well, let's zoom out here as we finish up. You had a great year this year, Great Lakes International Cider Competition. You had, as you mentioned, I think it was the highest score of the last 18 years in the competition. Many, number of best in classes. You've obviously Cidercraft last couple of years, you've cleaned up in their awards. I mean, you've been winning most of the major awards in pretty significant volumes. Yes. And so clearly what you're doing here is working, and it's working really well. What do you hope to achieve over the next 5 years and over the next 10 years? You're also not going to be here forever. And, this family and the multi-generational approach also clearly matters, not just with the farm, but, all of the ancillary businesses around that. You've opened up a tap room here in Cedar Edge in order to create an experience of your ciders that people around here can experience. What do you hope to achieve in the next 5 years? And where do you see Snow-Capped 10 years from now?
I really hope to see, I'm kind of grooming my son-in-law to take over the business in whatever aspect he chooses to be strong in, or whatever he wants to experiment in. I hope that someone in the family, this is what I envision myself in 10 years. I'm not going to be that old. So I envision myself in England drinking cider with my, cider heroes, and traveling around in Spain and drinking cider and great wine and experimenting and talking and learning about, more about their orchards than I know now. I hope that a family member will be able to drive this bus a little bit more for me. While still having my fingers in the business, and, at the same time saying, don't break it. I see us going into a few more states to use up some of the volume that I have my goal is really to teach people about good cider and to bring that back. And I really love to educate people about apples and about cider and about the history of cider. I see myself doing that. I see myself, sharing some of the things that I've learned in that aspect. I do need a little bit more distribution to take up some of that volume because my interest and passion is not in selling apples. My passion and interest is making cider. So I need to use up some of the volume that I've grown. The volume that I've planted is quickly catching up to where I'm at with distribution. So, soon I've got to do something with that. It'll be a problem to have, which I'm sure cider makers are thinking, I'm crazy for saying having too much fruit is a problem, but it is a problem, and it's hard to manage, and it's expensive and difficult, and it takes a lot. But I see Snowcap Cider. I really want Snowcap Cider to be known as one of the top 3, if not one of the premier cider companies in the world. I know that seems like a high, lofty goal, but I really want to put Colorado on the map for what I can do with my terroir, with growing at this elevation, with the blending techniques that I've learned, the finishing processes. I want to contribute to the future of the cider industry and where it is leveraged within the beverage world. And I want to be a contributor of that. I'm not interested in selling out and becoming a company that no longer uses my fruit or is a mass producer of anything. That is not my interest. My interest is to continually make fine cider and progress in that. So, we're almost there. We're getting there.
That is a fantastic place to bring this to a close. Choose G&D chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring. Take your operations to the next level with the experts at ProBrew. Old Orchard is the go-to source for fruit-forward ingredients for some of the biggest names in the craft brewing landscape. Omega Yeast's Daybreak 5 gives you juicy modern hop flavors without the haze. Take back control of your canning and seaming with the experts at RSS Macklin. Trust Indie Hop's unique varieties to modernize, brighten, and diversify your beer lineup. Berkeley yeast strains are designed to improve flavor, quality, and consistency. Visit breweryworkshop.com for more information about the upcoming brewery and distillery workshop this September. And if you're a distiller or curious about it, check out our craft spirits and distilling podcast. If you've enjoyed this podcast or any others, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, help us continue bringing you great content through all of the channels that we do. Kari, if people want to learn more about Snowcapped, about your core brands, about your highly specialized single variety special releases, about the new tap room that you've opened here in Cedar Edge, where do they learn more about you, both in real life and out there on the internet?
You can go to our website, which we're launching a new website next month with a new cider club, where you'll be able to get, as an elevation member or an elevated member of our club, you'll be able to receive anything that is a gold, double gold, platinum, or a best in class cider in your package twice a year.
Wow.
Yeah. And in the smaller volume club, you'll still get like really highly awarded and absolutely fabulous and be access to new releases and things that are maybe not as widely distributed because I'm not in a lot of states. I'm only in 4 states. But you'll be able to do that. And I think that's going to be a really great way to share fine cider and experiment with new things from here. And so our website's a great place. And you can watch for us in liquor stores, bars, restaurants, obviously. Social media. We're pretty active on social media. You can find us there.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, thank you for talking with me about your approach to cider making, Kari. It's been wonderful to come up here and see where it all happens and get to taste some of it with you. And then, of course, dive into your cider making mind. Cheers.
Cheers to you.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.